Merry Christmas. So this one says, this is a perfect example. So for those who say that pagan roots there's a pagan roots to Christmas, oftentimes, and I just had a guy today on Instagram talking about it's a Mithraic festival. And I said, well, what's your evidence? So here's the thing. Here's some of the claims that you'll see online. And this is an actual meme I found online. Born on December 25th, born of a virgin, star in the east, 12 disciples, dead for 3 days, resurrected, etc. So if someone wants to claim that based on these similarities, that there is a connection between Mithra and Christmas, I would say, okay, let's take that seriously. Let's dig in on that for just a second. Which Mithraic tradition are you talking about? Are you talking about Persian, the Persian version of Mithra? Zoroastrian, right? You've got Hindu, the Indian version in the Vedic scriptures, and then you've got Roman Mithraic myths, right? So which version is someone suggesting are the roots, pagan roots of Christmas? And so typically people will either say the Persian version, which is fun to say, or the Roman version, right? I haven't really heard anyone talk about the Vedic text. But what's interesting is I thought, now, full disclosure, I am not an expert in ancient Near Eastern mythology. I've had some classes on it. I've studied it, some of it on my own. So test me on all this stuff I'm about to show you. I am, however, a scholar, and I do have access to two research libraries. And so I took it upon myself to do some research on this. Now, before we get there, and I'm going to go through this, I'm just going to give you a real quick overview. Here's the thing that's really important for any of us. If anyone says Christmas is pagan, and if they're saying, especially if they're saying it in a meme, I made up a meme that we can use. It's called "Show Me the Evidence." So one of the things that we need to do, and as Christians, a lot of times what we do is we get unknowingly kind of pulled into this idea where they say it's pagan and we say, no, it's not. And we try to go find this evidence to disprove their claim. But here's the thing. In any sort of logical discourse and in any sort of logical conversation, the burden of proof is always on the person making the claim, not on the person denying the claim, right? This is true in a court of law. This is also true in just regular logical discourse. If someone wants to say Christmas has pagan roots, we are completely within our rights. And matter of fact, I would almost say we're obligated to say, show me the evidence of that. Because I'll tell you what, I don't think they'll be able to find a single scintilla of evidence anywhere. And here's the thing, when we are asking for this evidence, we're not asking for other modern authors and videos and memes and those sorts of things that believe the same way they do. Because anyone, as we all know in the internet age, anyone can make a video, anyone can write a book and publish it themselves. And then what happens is people do this, and then someone else sees it and they're convinced of it, and so they're quoting it. And so when you start to dig down and go, where'd you hear that? Okay, it reminds me of the REO Speedwagon song, right? Heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend. I'm not singing, I'm a bad singer, but you get the idea. I heard it from a friend. I heard it from and so you start tracing this down, and it's going in this big circle of people in the last maybe 50 years who are claiming this stuff. So the evidence I want to see your primary sources. I want to see the ancient documentation from which everything we know about Mithra has emerged, right? It's the same thing with the Bible. If someone wants to make a claim about what the Bible teaches, well, we can go to the Bible because the Bible is our primary source document. This is the actual writings of the apostles, the inspired text of the New Testament, and we can test what they're saying against what the text actually says. So same thing here. Show me the evidence. This is really all we need to do is just say, show me the evidence, and let them try to change our minds, right? Now, that's all we really need to do. But as a nerd, I went above and beyond, and I actually did some research. So let me walk you through this quickly. I think you'll find it quite interesting. So what I did was I looked through all of the ancient primary sources here, right? So I'm not going to read through everything. I'm just going to kind of go through it quickly. But as I mentioned, you've got these Persian and Zoroastrian sources, right? And these talk about, so there's a text called Yasht 10 or Mir Yasht that's entirely dedicated to Mithra. It talks all about this god of Mithra, right? And so going through the text, he's described as a protector of truth, an overseer of covenants, and a warrior that drives chariots, right? That's who he's described as, right? Other references, we've got the Yasna and the Vendidad texts. talking about him maintaining cosmic order. So that's kind of what he does. So, and aiding Ahura Mazda, who's the Persian creator deity, right? And so he's an assistant to the regional manager, an assistant to the big god. So that's all we've got in the Persian sources. In Indian, the Vedic sources, you got Rig Veda 359 and 760 that talks about Mithra, but it's sort of a hymn, right? And it shows him as a deity of contracts and oaths, which is a little bit like an overseer of covenants, right? And then and he also oversees cosmic order. So these are kind of related. They've borrowed from each other, right? And then you've got Roman Mithraism, which would seem to be the logical one that you would reach out to because Jesus lived during the Roman Empire, and the New Testaments wrote their documents within the culture of ancient Rome, right? So the Roman adaptation of Mithra took on a new form in the context of Mithraic mysteries. So this is a sort of a cult, a secretive cult from the 1st to the 4th centuries that worshipped Mithra, right? And so you've got very sparse literary sources that actually talk about what they did. It was a very secretive cult. So you've got Porphyry's Diantro Nympharum, which is this. I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like a philosophical framework where he's talking about these things, right? He's not actually saying it's not a mythological narrative where he says these are the things that Mithra did, right? You've got Statius and Lucian, who were Roman writers. One was a poet, one was a satirist. They briefly mention Mithras, so they'll just say the name, but they don't give you any details about who he is or what he did. You've got Marcianus Capella. Now, this one's interesting. So he lived in the 5th century. So we're talking 400 years after Christ, right? And he talks about Mithra in the context of Roman religious practices, right? And we've got we've got archaeological and iconographic sources, which is to say people didn't write about him, but we can learn things from artwork. And so we've got some stuff dedicated to Mithras and all that. So here's our key sources. And I'm going through this quickly. I could probably make this document available if anyone wants it. So you've got these key sources that talk about Mithra. These are the ancient primary sources from which everything we know today comes from these sources. You've got the Avesta, the Mir Yash, you've got the Rig Veda, and then you've got couple of these Roman writings, right? So here's what's interesting about Capella. He has this work called The Marriage of Philology and Mercury, right? And he talks about Mithras sort of in the context of Roman religious practices, but really what he's kind of doing is talking about the Roman practices, and then he'll kind of mention Mithra. It's very interesting. None of these texts are the kind of texts that we would read today, and they're not fun to read texts like the Odyssey or something, right? So these are texts where you have to kind of dig in and try to understand, okay, what exactly are they saying? And oh, because he says Mithra did this, that means he must have been thought to have this role, right? So what we've got here is, here, let me pull this down. Yeah. So the best I could pull out, Mithra in Capella is described as a mediator figure. So he's kind of between heaven and earth, right? He's mediating between heaven and earth. And then it's this idea of, and I put down here, connected to the movement of the heavens and possibly the Platonic idea of the soul's journey through the cosmos. So what he does in this document is Capella says he connects all the Mithraic rituals and ceremonies to the kind of philosophically connects them to the soul's journey through the cosmos. It's very ethereal, right? And this is what we've got. So philosophical integration. Yeah. Okay. So we've got, yeah. So this is basically it, guys. This is the extent of what we know about Mithra. And so if we go back here, show me the evidence. Hold on. Let's go back to this Krith myth. There's nothing at all about Mithra's birth in any of the ancient literature. It doesn't say anything about December 25th. It doesn't say anything about being born of a virgin. Matter of fact, the only thing that talks, even sort of hints at his birth, is some of the iconography that we have, some of the artwork, the Mithraic artwork. It seems to consistently show him being born out of a rock. Okay, this is what the primary source is. So anything that you see on this meme is all made up stuff by internet atheists and I guess internet theologians as well. It says nothing about a star in the east. The literature says nothing about 12 disciples, nothing about dead for 3 days, nothing about being resurrected. This is all what we call in theological terms BS. So this is all stuff that somebody made up and thought sounded great. They put out a meme, they put out a book, they put out a video, and for whatever reason, people start believing it. What we need to be doing as responsible Christians is saying, show me the evidence. Now, here, things get even more interesting here if we jump back over to this document, because I also discovered, what did early Christian writers say about Mithra? Right? Well, it's mostly polemical. So polemics are arguments against something, right? It's like apologetics, right? And their goal of these writers was to contrast Christianity with the Mithraic practices. They wrote about how different these things were, right? So here's some. Justin Martyr, right? He accuses demons of Mithraic practices as a counterfeit to Christian rites, right? You've got Origen in Contra Celsum. He critiques the Celsus's defense of pagan religions, including Mithraism. So he's tearing down the worship of Mithra. You've got Firmicus Maternus. He talks about, he critiques lots of pagan religions, and Mithra is one of them. He explicitly contrasts Mithraism's rituals with Christian doctrines. So early Christians saw Mithra as something other than Christianity, right? And then you've got Eusebius. He talks about Mithraic mysteries in the critique of paganism as well. Portrays, yeah. So here's the common themes. I just kind of summed it up for us. A lot of them said that that Mithraism borrowed from or mimicked Christian sacraments. Remember, the Roman Mithra mysteries cult began after Christ and lasted for 400 years. So they were saying, stop copying our stuff. The early Christians were saying that, right? It was also criticized for secrecy and mysterious rites, and they were contrasting that with the more open and communal nature of Christian worship. Christians didn't do that stuff, right? And then polemics against paganism in general, right? So they kind of lumped in the worship of Mithra. So knowing the source of Mithra in all these different traditions, pulling that information from the source documentation, and please check me on this. Knowing also, in addition, what early Christians thought and taught about Mithra, how in the world would they have said, you know what? I think we should start celebrating the birth of Christ. And I have a really good idea. Those guys worshiping Mithra have some really cool things they do. Let's do that. That makes no sense. This is ridiculous. So this is why I keep going back to this idea of show me the evidence, because there is no evidence. And this is true of Tammuz. This is true of, even some people will say Apollos. And some people say, well, these are all the same gods even. They all just morphed into one another and now it's Jesus, right? Again, ask for the evidence, because there's no proof of that. So again, my disclaimer, I'm not a professional ancient Near Eastern studies guy, but I'm confident in what I found, and I'm open though. If you guys find any other information, any other evidence, bring it forward. But again, we don't need to be weighed down by the modern interpretations of the ancient texts. Let's go to the ancient texts. Find out, where is the connection to Christmas? Did you see one? I didn't. Okay.